Hey, everybody, and welcome to DocTalk. I'm Dr. Erin Knopf.
Welcome, I'm Dr. Corinne Hannan.
All right, part four of intuitive eating. Let's go. All right, what are we
We're
talking
going to talk
about
about
today?
two principles, Principle 7 and Principle 8. And we'll start with Principle 7. What is the title, Dr. Knopf?
Cope with your emotions with kindness.
Yeah, this was a revision. Previously, they called this the principle about emotional eating. And I love this update to language. I think language matters so much. So cope with your emotions with kindness, that there's nothing inherently wrong with emotional eating. It's actually really, really common. It's effective in a lot of ways, especially in the short term. It's normal, it's biological, it's psychological. And it doesn't address the emotions that may be contributing to dysregulated, unbalanced, or particular eating styles.
I love
So
how
I
you
love that
mentioned
it's compassionate.
yes, I love how you mentioned too that how it is a natural part of multiple processes. I like to tell people it's actually what makes us human. It's actually what separates us from so many other creatures on this earth is the fact that we have enjoyment and we have emotional connection with food and an emotional satisfaction with food. So the last
Mhm.
thing we want to do is demonize our unique gift.
Agreed. But let's just, as we talk about coping with your emotions with kindness, one of the most important principles that Evelyn Tribole and Elise Risch bring up in Intuitive Eating, fourth edition, is that you need to recognize first and foremost that restriction, physical and mental restriction, can feel like you're eating emotionally. So it's really important to figure out if this has been the only tool that you've had to cope with years of dieting, feelings of deprivation, feelings of despair. Dieting itself can trigger emotions, which can lead to
Because
using food
duh.
as. Mhm. So just figure out if this is a reaction to dieting and restriction. And then also figure out ways to address your need for comfort, your need to be nurtured, your need to be distracted. Also, if you have anxiety, loneliness, boredom, anger, those are all emotions that we all experience pretty endlessly throughout our life. And they each have their own trigger and they have their own appeasement. And food doesn't actually get to the core of those. It's kind of like a short-term strategy with sometimes a long-term backfire if it gets unbalanced or it gets disordered.
And if anything, I love to helping individuals understand the nuances of emotions, right? It's so interesting. People will conflate physical feelings and emotions. They will separate and isolate two independently feelings and emotions. They see there's just so many different ways of looking at the nuance here. But when you said dieting itself can trigger emotions, that's because, again, you will feel it in your body through different biological cues that will make you feel different emotions too, of potentially fight or flight if your body is really restricted in its diet, where you're going to feel more anxiety, you're going to feel a little bit of more of a panic, and then when you do finally eat, you're going to feel this wave of relief. That is an emotion, but that is where dieting creates this misconstrued version of emotional eating.
Perfectly said. And one thing that we talk about all the time with clients is that I as a therapist, I love to get into the emotional origins of some of your maybe disordered relationship with food, but we can't do that until we first address the disordered eating. And so
The
ultimately,
behavior
once you
itself. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. If you stabilize the behavior, we can get to the root causes and some of the origins or etiologies of some of the emotional dysregulation that may be very often contributing to the disordered eating. So, food can sometimes distract, it can numb, it can appease in the moment, but getting to the root of what's going on emotionally, it really comes from a normal regulated long-term relationship with food, and then you can deal with the source of the emotion. And I would add that none of it will feel quite as overwhelming, in my opinion, when you're well nourished and when you have body
Mm,
trust.
yeah, totally.
So do you want to talk about that 2013 study?
Yeah. This actually kind of nails home that impression we have as clinicians because what do you know? There was a study done, which you may not have heard of. It was done in 2013. More than 35,000, that's 353, and then 000, 3 zeros. Men and women found that former or current dieters have more emotional eating than those with no history of dieting. And that's again because eating is connected to our psychology and our biology. And when you restrict food or you don't provide enough caloric nutrition for your body and you are depriving it through excessive exercise, your body will feel that consequence and give you again those cues to say, hey, not cool, not cool, not cool.
Yeah, and to make matters worse, diet culture and media send really mixed messages about food. And we're going to talk more about media in some of our following doc talks. But diet culture villainizes emotional eating, which reinforces another round of food restriction to compensate for emotional eating. And round we go with this disordered cycle.
Yeah.
And then eating also usually has emotional associations. And there are ads that will imply that foods can like solve all of our problems or turn us into like highly sexual creatures in the way that we're eating food or experiencing food. And then it's giving us all these mixed messages about food kind of being the solution to all our problems, but also the root cause of all of our problems. And like we talked about in our last section about food satisfaction, I think especially here in America, we get such mixed messages about food being kind of the source of all of our problems and the source of all of the solutions. We can just like crack the code, and it makes people ambivalent, checked out, confused, and like just not in relationship with food and not present with eating.
Exactly. And when we talk about food being soothing, no one questions that biological truth when we look at infants when they're eating. They get distressed as a cue of, hey, please feed me. And they are soothed by eating. Sometimes they also just want to eat for general self-soothing, even if they're not necessarily that hungry. It literally is something they are all already biologically and innately wired to connect to. So why would we invalidate our humanness, if you will, when we are adults, just for the sake of proving we have some capacity that to deny biology? Honestly, I really don't understand why our modern times are constantly focused on how can we outsmart our bodies? How can we work in an antithetical way to our bodies just so we can pat ourselves on the back and be like, woohoo? I don't understand that aim at all.
Yeah. Agreed. And, you know, it goes beyond infancy. In infancy, it's really important to look at that because it's obviously so biological and primal. In fact, I've read that if you put a freshly birthed infant on its mother's stomach, it will inchworm over to its mother's breast, latch on, and
Yes.
begin to nurse. It's such a cool instinct that we have. And then it becomes something that we do, nurse or give a bottle to babies for also just quelling crying, for emotional management. And we do it with toddlers, or we do it with elementary school kids. We're like, if you pay attention, we can get a cupcake, or we can get a cookie, or we'll get a dum-dum sucker after you go to get your
Which we've
immunization.
also talked about, though. We really do need to try to remove this whole like treat incentive language. But at the same time, that is what's making that incentive manipulative and
Happening.
functional. Yeah,
Yeah, the
because we're
mix,
using
it will,
biological cues.
it's all messaged in every like layer of our culture. So I like this quote from Evelyn Tribole, and she says, "Food is love, food is comfort, food is reward, food is a reliable friend. And sometimes food becomes your only friend in moments of pain and loneliness." So it's no surprise that food can and does become a special salve with how emotionally charged it is, culturally
Yeah.
charged. It's even religiously charged. It's charged in the family. It's charged in the
Yeah.
media. So for some people, it's very clear that food is a coping mechanism, and other people, there's a lot of work to do to untangle what food means to them, how they're using it in adaptive ways, in maladaptive ways. It just depends again on how astute you are at being in tune with yourself. Just like we talked about interoceptive awareness with hunger, satiety, fullness cues, you also have to get that awareness of your feelings and being curious and compassionate and kind of scientific data gathering about the origin of your feelings.
It really makes me think about the cultural practices around grief and like funeral celebration of life gatherings. They are so food centric. In fact, I know in Jewish culture, when you're sitting Shiva or 7 days of mourning, people bring you food. That is the cultural practice of don't make the mourning individual work on feeding themselves, bring them food, make sure it's available and plentiful. And I think somewhere down the line in evolution, we as human beings realize food can be comforting to us. And perhaps even if someone else knows of specific data or research around this, please let us know in the community. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's because of that natural biological link of food provides the building blocks for serotonin. And serotonin is our hormone that we have innately, our neurotransmitter that helps us with feeling soothed.
I love that. That
Yeah,
just reminded me, I grew up in a religious culture where when there was a funeral, there was a particular kind of potatoes that were often brought to like feed the family, and that it's scalloped potatoes or sour cream potatoes,
delicious.
but we call them my community, we call them funeral potatoes because they're so often brought too. So whenever we eat them, they're funeral potatoes. Anyway, so just kind of
Interesting.
building on that. So the last point that we wanted to talk about with coping with your emotions with kindness is how complex that can be, how ingrained that can be, and that eating problems aren't always emotional. Like we already said, it can be due to restriction alone. But there also can be some other factors that can be contributing to eating in ways that are unbalanced or that might be restrictive or might be binge laden. So we want to talk about some of the basics of self-care when we're looking at our relationship with food. How much sleep are you getting? What kind of quality of sleep are you getting? What are some other things that you feel like people should look at when determining if some of their eating problems have emotional origins?
I mean, stress is the number one that I think of just because we know cortisol gets released in times of stress. And this doesn't have to just be a true life threatening stress. It is, in our modern parlance, anything that makes us feel any level of anxiety or negative anticipation, even positive anticipation, can lead to cortisol increases. But especially sleep. I mean, sleep is the number one thing. My patients will know that I beat this like a drum. If their mood symptoms are worsening, their behaviors are worsening, we always go back to look at what is the quality of your sleep. How much are you helping your body accept rest using really good sleep hygiene practices? Are you getting enough sleep? Is it high quality sleep? Are you having interruptions? I mean, that's huge. And then the nourishment component, of course, makes sense that would relate as well. If you're not providing a balanced nutrition of your macromolecules and micronutrients, that can affect your sleep. So that's where someone can say, I feel bad, but so I'm leaning into my eating disorder behaviors when really the eating disorder behaviors are exacerbating why the individual feels bad.
Perfect. So sleep, stress, which is huge, right?
Huge.
Nourishment, also huge. Those are all three just huge ones. And then kind of connected to those would be life balance. Are you getting play? Something I talk to my clients about all the time. Are you getting play? Are you getting pleasure? Are you getting rest? Are you getting creativity? Are you getting connection? Not just work, right? Not just
Behavioral
tending to your
activation and enjoyment in life.
yes. And then there are stealth ways that you can be deprived, like just that the diet mentality might still be chattering at you while you're eating food, which can contribute to mental restriction. Have you truly worked on one of our earlier principles about making peace with food? Have you worked on the principle of finding out if you have satisfaction with food? Do you have food security? Do you have
Mm,
access to a variety of foods? There's so many ways that you might be getting stealth deprivation that may be contributing to unbalanced patterns that aren't just about emotions, but lots of restrictive factors that may or may not be inside your control.
exactly.
All right, well, let's move on to principle 8. This is one of my favorite principles. It's so powerful. It's respect your body. Respect is such a beautiful word.
RESPECT.
And we could talk about this for hours, but we're not. We're going to talk about it for 15 minutes. And then we're going to talk about elements of offshoots of respecting your body in some of our upcoming doc talks. So the first question I want to ask you, Dr. Knopf, about respecting your body is how do you fit into your genes? Can you spell genes for me?
GENES. not jeans, the denim, the Levi's, jeans as in your DNA makeup. We, again, as human beings in modern time, we must be bored because we keep trying to outsmart biology and outsmart our genes, which that is our code that created everything for what we are uniquely showing up in the world as physically and even emotionally. Again, we haven't fully sussed that out yet, but why do we keep trying to say we can rewrite the codes and create a different outcome? Because we're chasing some ideal that was artificially and superficially imposed on us by diet culture, by capitalism, by sexism, racism. What else?
Yes.
Anti-fatness. All of these
Billions
things.
of billions of dollars have been invested in teaching us lies about our bodies. And so if that same
Mhm.
amount of money and time and effort had been invested into teaching us truths about our genetic blueprints, we would be spend so much less time, energy, money, wasted life on trying to dramatically change our bodies. So I like this quote by Evelyn Tribole that says, accept your genetic blueprint. Just as a person with a shoe size of 8 would not expect to realistically squeeze into a size 6, it is equally
Ouch.
futile and uncomfortable to have the same expectation about body size. But mostly, respect your body so you can feel better about who you are. It's hard to reject the diet mentality if you are unrealistic and critical about body size and shape. All bodies deserve dignity. Isn't that beautiful?
Absolutely.
Now, you and I both know that that is way easier to read and say than for our clients to
Yeah,
enact, right?
totally, totally. Because if anything, I think something that is a universal truth for all human beings is there some level of a negative core belief that lives inside of us and feeds that inner voice that usually creates more insecurity, self-doubt, self-criticism. So yeah, it's really hard to make sure that voice is treating your own body with dignity, let alone asking for others to treat your body with dignity as well. And
Yeah, so
dignity,
what
by
do
the
we
way, is the state or quality of being worthy of honor or respect. So that never changes. That is an inherent truth that you are always in a state of being worthy of honor or respect in your body.
That's a perfect segue into one of my favorite educators about radical self body love is Sonia Renee Taylor. And her book, The Body Is Not an Apology, is in its second edition, and there's a workbook as well. And I highly, highly recommend that people listen to this phenomenal educator and poet and writer and body liberator. And one of the things she says is, how can your body be wrong? How can the vehicle, which we all have in order to live our lives and kind of get through whatever the heck is going on this earth, be inherently wrong? And I just love the thought of really truly accepting and celebrating diversity that includes in ability, in size, in shape, in weight, and just celebrating how varied bodies are instead of putting them in a hierarchy with an ideal at the top, putting bodies on a ladder with like some bodies being more
Yeah,
worthy than others. So I think
yeah.
that ties in perfectly with your definition of dignity, which is all people, all bodies are inherently worthy of this dignity.
Absolutely. And I love how you brought up abilities too versus disabilities. I think culturally, we have watched humans stigmatize, isolate those with different abilities or disabilities, depending on your preferred nomenclature, when really, again, this is just one more nuance of biodiversity. And I think because of that separation and that stigma and discrimination, let's be honest, it created this cycle of shame and guilt. And so it makes sense that people do feel if they don't meet one parameter of ideals and characteristics, that they are wrong. And it's time that we reclaim the language around bodies, reduce the moralization, and instead celebrate that people are going to have different abilities and capabilities. As much as I wish I could sing like Kelly Clarkson or Adele, that is not my talent. But it's not something that I have to be hard on myself for. And I know that's a very superficial example compared to someone who has different capacities for movement, for cognitions, things like that. But this is still cut from that same cloth.
It is. And I want to say respect your body is such an important principle because what it encompasses is body image. And we are going to talk a
Mm-hmm.
lot more about body image. And in recovery from an eating disorder, one of the things I talk to my clients about is that body image is going to be probably the last thing to change and maybe the slowest
Always.
to change, but it will change as you and this is how body image changes. It changes as your thinking about your body changes. It's not about changing your body, it's changing how you think about your body. And so just as like the best way to really kind of connect with this is that usually people when they're really really young and uninhibited in their bodies, they're just enjoying their bodies versus thinking about how
Totally.
others are thinking about their bodies. And so everything that made you insecure about your body was something you learned from culture, something you learned from media, something you mislearned from your family, learned because it wasn't inherently true. And so you can also unlearn it. You can also powerfully undo that stuff, but it is the last to change because it's a big topic. It's a big, big topic. And because it
It
also
is.
involves diet culture and weight stigma and fat phobia. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's important to name this is a universal pursuit that everyone can find relief and freedom in. If you can find the ability to respect and accept your body as it is. Because I have not met a single human in my life who doesn't have some level of this permeating as a filter point for which they make decisions for how they choose what they do next. And having that true freedom where you are not beholden to an artificial limitation is one of the most exciting experiences ever. And I can even speak to myself being in this field as a clinician today. I put on a romper and realized I don't know if it's shrunk in the laundry or if my body changed, but it don't fit anymore. And I was like, all right, giving it away. And that was it. It was done. I didn't even think about it again. And then when I realized I was able to do that so quickly and easily, it was really exciting because I too, like any other human being, have lived through the times of like, I want to fit in this again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
No, give it up.
No.
Life's too short.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you know you've done this work, right? And I just want to say, like,
Mm.
fat phobic culture is everywhere. And in our doc talks coming up, we're going to address a lot of this. And we have in some of our previous doc talks about health at every size. But fat phobic culture is in healthcare, it's in schools, it's in places of worship, it's all over the media, all over social media,
All of
it's
it.
in grocery stores, it's in the beauty industry,
Hollywood.
it's in the fitness industry, it's in family and friends. It is inescapable. So working on establishing dignity and respect for your body is essential to your well-being. So we have
Yeah.
10 points about how to respect your body. Okay.
I actually think before we give the how, let's just expand a little bit more about what are the premises of body respect and dignity, because I realize these are needs and
Mhm.
points of inherent deserving. It makes it easier to make those choices of how do I enact this in my life. So
Good
what
call.
do you normally name as like the basic premises of body respect?
Okay, so respecting your body means treating it with dignity while holding the intention of meeting its basic needs. So let's talk about 5 basic needs. My body deserves to be fed. My body deserves to be treated with dignity. My body deserves to be dressed comfortably and in a style that I like. My body deserves to be touched affectionately with my consent and with respect. This includes cuddling with pets
Or husbands and
or
spouses and partners?
whatever you want. And my body deserves to move comfortably to the extent it is possible.
Yes. Okay. So then now let's get into like the how to's because everyone wants a little quick tip that they can take away, right? So the first one is similar to what I brought up before. Throw out old clothes that do not fit because if you're wearing something that doesn't fit, whether too big or too small, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be very comfortable. And it's probably not going to be in the style anymore either that you might feel cooler in. Oh my God, the word
Can
cooler.
I make one comment about this? I do
Please
want
do.
I do want to acknowledge the inherent privilege in this because it is
Oh,
expensive to
yes.
buy new clothing. And then I myself am a very tall person, and it is very difficult to find clothing that is long enough for my body. So it is inherently painful when I do have to get rid of clothing, even though it's not necessarily about that my body has changed. It's just about how difficult it is to find clothes
That
that
makes
are long
sense.
enough for me. And I've worked with clients who continue to have that problem as their body changes in a bigger plus size, that it's just really difficult for them to find comfortable and fashionable clothing. So I want to acknowledge that it is always important to dress your body comfortably and buy new clothing as appropriate. And there's inherent economic privilege and accessibility woven into that. So it is complex.
Thank you so much for adding that. Thank you. Okay, what else would you recommend as a quick how to, not quick, but a immediate how
How
to,
to
let's
respect your
implement
body.
it.
So yeah, buy clothing that fits you as you are able, and wear comfortable clothing as you are able. And if you notice that things make you more body image conscious or make you more prone to restrictive eating or obsessing about it, try to get rid of those clothes and wear clothes that continue to aid you in your recovery and feeling at ease within your own body. As much as possible, accessing privilege. One more I want to add is to stop body checking. This is something very common in our clients with
Mhm.
mirrors, with reflective surfaces, or pinching areas of their body, checking like that. As much as you can, we want to eliminate that. What would you add?
I think it goes hand in hand with that. It's if you catch yourself body checking, take notice of the language you use and how you describe your body and how you speak about your body internally, because that's also what will likely show up externally. And you don't need to be your own personal bully. That's really a hard way to live life, having a constant degradation in your thoughts that then hurts your feelings and hurts your perspective and possibilities for the future. So I think really bringing awareness and consciousness to your language and altering that language, where if you're going to say something negative about your body, you need to back it up with, now I'm going to say something positive about my body if I caught myself saying something negative, just because move on. And if anything, add an extra positive comment just to overcompensate.
My next one is very common with people with eating disorders. I would say not even common, it's like a given, is that they're going to be comparing their body with other people, evaluating hierarchically, competing
Yeah.
with other people in terms of their bodies. So try to stop that as much as you can, and also get rid of your scale in terms of your body checking and comparison with others.
Totally. Because as we said over and over again, your weight is actually supposed to change with the years you live on this planet. There is no such biological truth where it is healthier for you to still be the weight you were in one decade of life when you have advanced to another decade of life. Not real. Not real. Okay, one final point before we end today. The big thing that we know happens, I guess, again, in families, friends, circles, everything is what do you do when there's a big event and you're like, but I just want to be in this size before I go to my sister's wedding, before I have my own wedding, before I go on a beach trip. What do you say to patients when they bring that up, or really anybody?
Oh my gosh, I have so many things I say, but the first one is that there's always going to be a new big event, right? It's family photos, but it's like my high school graduation, then it's my high school graduation reunion, then it never ends. And so if you feeling like you need to radically change, shrink your body or squeeze into something for a special outfit, it will only backfire. Your best long-term investment is in your relationship with your body, and your body at the size where it feels at ease. That's the best investment in your long-term health and wellness that will actually make you more present to enjoy those big events.
If anything, it's not just recognizing being at the point where your body feels ease, but also just recognizing your body is where it is. And it doesn't have to be this constant compulsion to adjust it. It can just be an observation. Now we move on. That's it. You
Yeah.
can't have the body you had before. It was interesting, especially in social media. I see so many more posts from different mom influencers and, you know, people trying to really promote better relationships with food and body, recognizing I wish I could have gone back to my high school self and loved my body then. Because
Oh,
now
totally.
someone finds themselves looking at pictures and missing and mourning that body, but remember feeling uncomfortable in that body. And the same thing is true for the
Exactly.
college years, and the same thing is true for the early adult years. Same thing is true pre-babies if you had babies. And really noticing that every time you're in one of those chapters, you were potentially experiencing dissatisfaction. What if it means today you decide to feel no more dissatisfaction, but instead feel satisfied and grateful that your body does what it can do? And we'll talk more in another doc talk about functionality and capacity and capability, but it just gives kind of a word to the future of let's not keep creating the same paradox of being
That takes
dissatisfied
away
in
your
the
whole
moment,
life.
only that
You've
takes away your
spent
whole
your
life and
whole
only
life
makes
hating your
you,
body. It's no way to live. Yeah.
yeah. And then you just longed for it in the next decade and you didn't know you would do that. Well, then now you know. You have enough evidence. Time to do it differently.
And my clients all acknowledge that they're hating the body they're in. And then I say, did you hate when you were 10 years younger, did you hate that body then? Yes, I did. What would you say now about that body? That body was amazing. What do you think you might say 10 years from now about this body? Probably that it's amazing and you're hating the body you're in. Is this how you want to spend your life? Right.
Yes.
And super
What a
quick, which we're going
waste.
to talk about in our body image stuff, is that sometimes it really is hard to just be grateful and respectful of your body. But
Mm-hmm.
one thing you can practice is being kind of inside your body instead of observing your body from the outside. So as much as possible, either thinking little about your body with body neutrality or trying to feel like what it's like to swim instead of imagining, for
Mm.
example, people are thinking about you in a swimsuit. That's another way to kind of start getting in your
Mm.
life,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Actually participate in your wedding and eat the wedding cake instead of imagine what everyone's thinking when they look at your body, for example.
Yes, yes. Oh God, that's so much brain energy consumption right there. Well, anyways, join us every Friday for a live webinar. Again, these are recorded and put in our recovery community, and we hope to see you there. I am Dr. Erin Knopf.
I'm Dr. Corinne Hannan. We'll see you next time.
Bye.